You're Justin Silver.
How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for popping my cherry. You're the first comedian I've interviewed.
Oh, really?
So I know this morning when you woke up, you didn't think you'd be popping a big, heavyset guy's cherry.
Well, I did. You know what? You're the third one today, so you
Really?
don't feel too special.
Good enough.
I'm the first comedian, really?
You really are the first
All right,
comedian.
first
on my
comedian
show.
actor.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, man. Well, I'm glad to be here.
So what
I'll try to make a good impression.
Yeah. If not, then I'll just delete the interview.
All right.
When did you first decide you wanted to take being a comedian seriously as a career? Were you just a little smart ass growing up, or later?
Yeah. I was definitely like a class clown just from having sort of like a troubled childhood and being very confused and being very artistic. I was raised in a very artistic household. My mother was an artist and she was a designer, and I was a fine artist, and also from a very young split with my parents when I was 2 years old. I was just confused and a little troubled, and it was impossible for me to sit still in class, and so I was definitely like a class clown and a performer, but also my artistic mind was always more geared toward piece of paper and art supplies. And then as I was in art school, and I was in college in art school, the School of Visual Arts, and then I got exposed to the filmmaking department, and then from there was the acting department. And I realized that the same creative process that's going on in your mind can take place in different genres, and it scratches the exact same itch. So I put down the pen and paper for a little while and just started picking up performance art, and it was something that I really took to, and I didn't really miss expressing myself in one genre. Like, it just sort of transferred to the other one. And I just dove into acting and loved it, and dropped out of college a year before I was going to graduate, and just started pursuing acting a lot, and studied everything from Miser techniques to Shakespeare to a lot of scene study. And the audition process was a little lackluster because when you're in classes, you're doing all these, you're doing some of the greatest works of playwright and filmmaking. So, and then you're doing these auditions where it was like, I booked spots on like Guiding Light and little soap operas here and there, and going on Dannon commercials and stuff, and you're like, wait a second, these things don't really add up. And I still had this big desire to express myself, but I didn't really want to write plays that didn't feel right to me, and I was a huge fan of comedy. I would go to the Comedy Cellar and watch Dave Attell and Colin Quinn, and I just felt like I always felt like comedians were like magicians. Like, they had this ability to just like control me like a button, like get me to laugh and just explode from the inside out with their words. And I remember watching George Carlin as a kid and be like, this is unbelievable how he just knows when everybody's gonna laugh. And when I went to the Comedy Cellar, I was just so in love with watching those guys perform, and I was like, I want to try this. And then it was open mics, and then fast forward 7 years after that, I'm performing on the same shows with Colin Quinn and the same shows with Dave Attell, and they've I've been on the road with them, and they now, and it just it's been a difficult and sloppy and exciting and fun process that I'm still in the middle of. Comedian's life is like it's more than just something that you do.
Right.
If you take it seriously, it's like you have to dive all the way in, and you are soaking wet from sometimes underwater with it.
Did having a little bit of the acting background erase some of the stage fright, or it's kind of different because you're really being a lot more vulnerable when you're doing comedy, I would think?
Yeah, you are being a lot more vulnerable because you're not, the words and everything you're expressing is all you. And good acting, you are being vulnerable because you're really putting yourself into that character. But this stage fright wasn't so much there. I never really had stage fright. I always said I have life fright.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the kind of person, the stage for me is a place where once I felt like a little bit of competence and a little bit of confidence in the jokes I was telling, I felt very comfortable up there. Because this sounds like a weird thing because you're on such a tightrope.
Yeah.
There is no safety net. You have however much time. You can't just like go to your guitar or go to the script. Like, there is none of that. It's like, if they just stop laughing, you are bombing. And there is a bright light on you, and your voice is magnetized, and any little shakiness they're gonna hear, and they smell a lack of confidence,
chum in the water,
like
right?
sharks smell chum in the water. But for some reason, that still feels like an environment that I have a sense of control over. Whereas a lot of times in real life, you're like, what the fuck is going on out here?
Yeah.
The stage is still a place where it's like, I'm in charge of that space. And so I've always sort of felt comfortable there. And it's only when I'm doing new material or I'm being really vulnerable that sometimes, it's not that I feel uncomfortable on stage, sometimes I just don't know what I'm talking about just yet.
Right.
But it's not the stage that intimidates me at all.
Now, when you were first starting out, how did you handle hecklers or a dead crowd? Did you try to work even harder to get them hooked in, or did you just say, screw it, there's nothing I can do at this point?
Yeah, they were at first there. It's intimidating, and those were times where I would kind of like freeze up and be like, shit, and get a little panicky, and I wouldn't know how to get myself out of a combative position with them. But the great thing about doing comedy in New York City, where you're around I was around so many great, like watching Jim Norton handle hecklers, watching Colin Quinn handle them, watching, Jay Okerson would take me on the road and his crowd work is amazing. Mike Vecchione, some of my peers are some of the best comics in the country. Just watching the way they handle them and learning the art of sort of turning it around so that you are not the bad guy. And there's times where you really have to put someone in their place because they're just being a jerk off and they're being an asshole. And the rest of the room knows it, and so they just want this person to shut up. So it's sort of like you're doing the job that like the security should be doing.
Right.
But there's other times where people are shouting things out and the crowd's like, ooh, let's see how this goes. And I think what I really learned, especially from Jay Okerson, was really to allow that person the chance to speak, hear what they have to say, and if to like give it back to them. What is it that you have to say? Are you adding something here? And you can start to almost have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like if it doesn't, and you can make it funny if it's going to actually go somewhere. And if it's not going to be funny, there's no reason to tell the person, just tell them they're an idiot. They end up just kind of feeling like, well, what I thought I was adding, or my 1 second of attention here, didn't really pay off. And you don't really have to beat them up so much. There's a way to do it very gracefully. And the other thing is we're up there every night, multiple times a night. So that stuff is just I don't know, it's like a little hiccup at work almost. It's like, it so doesn't have the effect on us that people would think. If anything, sometimes when it does throw you off, it's only because it's annoying and they're interrupting your flow. Yeah. But I very rarely had situations where the heckler's empowered and now, you're thrown off your game. That's kind of, you learn how to deal with that pretty early on. And I'm a crowd work type of comedian. I love talking to the audience, and I like being generous with them, almost I've never taken improv, but almost in an improvisational type of way. Right. And so for me, it's sort of like, I'll go there and explore. I'm not worried to sit in silence or get into an awkward conversation with someone and be like, all right, well, that had no payoff, and moving on. Then that becomes funny. Right. You know what I mean? So that I've just sort of learned from comedians who really know how to handle that.
Now, from when you first started to today, today's world is absolutely absurd. Do you have more material now because of how ridiculous everyone is? Not even just necessarily political, both sides, but just people are absolutely insane nowadays. So does it give you more material, or? I don't know. I only live in now, so I don't. I don't know. How long have I been doing comedy? The world. Here, let me say it like this. I don't know if the world is any crazier because, comedians during World War II must have been like, hey, isn't this crazy? People are being thrown in ovens here. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think the world, comedians during slavery must have been like, hey, look, the world is fucking crazy. Look what we do to people. So I don't know if the world is any crazier, but I will tell you this. So much of my act now has been, I've been talking about my own foibles and difficulties with digital addiction, a digital world, just life in the digital atmosphere, from everything from the arguments I get on with Amazon customer service to sexting to my addiction to my phone. A big part of my act is just on the digital environment and how much of a toll that takes from my own narcissism and Instagram accounts. So I think that it's certainly not been, there's not been a time I've been struggling for material with that lately. Is there a point that you, or a line that you won't cross, or everything's fair game?
Example.
Why would you go after somebody's mom, or somebody, or somebody that's just died, or a tragedy like 9/11, stuff like that?
Here's the thing,
it's got to be like a tight rope to walk because.
Here's how I do everything. This is the way I view comedy. Okay, I put myself. I focus on my own issues and my own shit, which then gives you permission to talk about everybody else's.
Agreed.
But I'm always sort of the butt of my jokes. So I talk about my insecurities. I talk very vulnerably, and if I'm talking about other things, it's usually from the perspective of like, this is how I'm trying to get through the day gracefully, and here's how I've bumped my head, fallen down, scraped my knees, fucked myself up in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
And anything I'm talking about, I talk about from the perspective of my own dysfunctions. And here's the other thing, and this is an honest thing, it's like, I don't look like most comedians look. So I think it's very easy for me to be a non-sympathetic character on stage. And this is something I learned from my comic friends who were like incredible masters of talking about themselves vulnerably. And they said, you have, like, I look like a douchebag, and I'm not. And so, like, for me, when I first get on stage, the thing I'm working against is like, I have to almost qualify why I deserve to be here. And my act, so much of my act, I talk about my obsessive compulsive disorder. I talk about my battles with weird narcissistic injury I had when I was a kid. I talk about so much of my dysfunctions that I feel like that's really the voice. That's sort of my comedic voice. If anything's going on political, I mean, I'm the last person you're going to hear about something political or Trump. Like, I just don't give a fuck when it comes to things like that. Like, I try. It's how each person expresses themselves of what matters to them. And there are a lot of social important things that matter to me. Like, there's the charity I have. The work I do with dogs and animals, but the way I go about doing that is I do comedy benefits for those causes. But really, it's like my comedic expression is almost more of, like, we're all the walking wounded here, and here are our issues du jour, and it's like.
I do want to talk about your charity in a second.
Yeah, sure.
My thing with comedians and the audience actually is like, you're going there to laugh.
Yeah.
Things are going to be inappropriate.
Yes.
That are said.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to a comedy show, so to go there and get so frustrated and get yourself so mental over it.
Yeah.
Don't go to a comedy show. That's my big takeaway from the audiences that I've been in. Like, they go nuts. It's just like, you went to a comedy show. You didn't go see a movie. They're not going to talk back to you. They're not going to do anything like that in a movie. If that's what you wanted, then you shouldn't be in a comedian's audience.
The thing that's really frustrating with audiences now is we're in this PC culture where the point of comedy is to take the sting out of words. You know what I mean? Like, when you're hanging around with your best friends and your family, like, what do people do? Like, you make fun of each other. And when you make fun of each other and you're able to laugh at yourself and you're able to laugh at your problems and your friends are able to laugh at your problems, those problems don't have the weight that they do. And to be able to take the most serious topics, whether it's hashtag Me Too movement, transgender issues, Trump, and people in enslavement in different cultures, whatever it is, the most serious and darkest issues, to not be able to make fun of those things and bring a sense of levity to them is to really be weakened by them socially to the soul, to the point where you're like, now there's no outlet. And comedy is such a wonderful outlet, and it's such a wonderful exhaust pipe, and it's such a way that people, through the comic, I think, get the chance to hear what a lot of us are thinking and get the chance to almost do like a primal scream via laughter. And when audiences are like, oh, you can't say that, don't go there, they're really doing themselves a disservice. Because I remember, this is great, man. I have this tattoo on my arm. It's my grandparents' initials. So Dave Attell brought me on stage the other day because we were at the end of his set. He likes to, whatever comic's opening for him, he likes to bring up, and there's a back and forth, which he's doing that with Jeff Ross. They're doing Bumping Mics, which is on Netflix right now. And it was so funny, man. My grandma passed away, and he goes, oh, what's the tattoo in your arm? I go, it's my grandparents' initials. He goes, oh, you love your grandparents? I go, yeah, and they were both Holocaust survivors. He goes, oh, well, if you really loved them, how come you didn't get their numbers tattooed on your arm? That was the funniest fucking thing. My family was in the audience and they laughed their ass off, and I watched so many people go, huh? And I was like, and Dave's Jewish and so am I. So it's like
Right.
you really just miss the fun of that.
Yeah.
And that's something that's that's something that's like if anybody could say something like that, it's me and him. You know what I mean? I think his parents are Holocaust survivors too or something. So it's like to be so PC and to tiptoe around everything all the time. It's just like ugh.
Have you ever said something that immediately after you said it, you knew either you took it too far or it was maybe I shouldn't have said it?
No, but here's what did happen. I went through I went through a bit of a epiphany recently with comedy as a result of something that I was doing that I realized was just like I was going down a bad road.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting into this almost like overconfident heel persona on stage. You know, like in wrestlers, there's like the heel.
Yeah.
And I was like, I realized like I was beating the audience up a little bit because I was getting frustrated with them because of how things were going career-wise.
Gotcha.
Like things, and it was all funny, but I realized like when people would shout out or like hecklers, I was being a little bit of a bully, and it's not, and I don't think audiences really picked up that this was something that it wasn't like this was like offensive or it went too far, but I realized that I didn't like myself on stage as much. And I was like, wait a second, you've really lost an element of vulnerability here. And then I went through something really deep personally, like something really dark personally happened to me. It was like this relationship thing. And I was really vulnerable and upset. And I was performing right after this thing happened. And I was like, man, I really need to connect. Like I needed the audience. Like I needed to connect with them. I needed to talk. Like I needed to express myself. And that wasn't going to be an option when I was doing those sets. And there were elements of what I was going through that I wanted to talk about on stage. And I was like, I wonder if I can explore this and go here. But it really required like an element of trust on both parties, on myself and this audience. So I was doing a few headline sets, and I just slowed down. And I remember even the jokes that I had been doing forever, the way I communicated them is like I was looking and I always look in the audience's eyes. I like when there's enough light where I can see everybody. But I was talking directly to them, and I was the way I was engaging them, and in between the jokes, I always work crowd work, whatever's going. I work my set, I interweave it with the crowd work and the stuff that's going on in front of me, which is also great because it makes it all personal. Like they know that some of these jokes are written, but at the same time, it's like there's so much funny stuff that's happening in the room, like playing audience members off of each other. And as a result of that, like it was so much more fulfilling, and I got to talk about topics of things that were bothering me and find the funny in them because I had the permission to do that from the audience I was talking to. And just like you and I are having a conversation right now. So if we're having a conversation, like I have to feel comfortable with you and you have to feel comfortable with me. And if if we have this conversation and you're a little bit like a dick, I'm gonna close off a little bit.
Right.
And so in order to open up to them, I needed them to feel comfortable and open with me.
That makes
And then
sense.
my comedy took a real turn, and since then, I just feel like it feels so much more grounded, and I just love being up there. And I was like, it doesn't matter, career-wise things are going fine, but it doesn't matter what's happening externally.
Right.
When I'm on the stage and I'm with them, it's like this is our time together, and that's when. If there are hecklers in moments like that and somebody who's being really rude and disruptive, I'm like, now you're just fucking this up.
Right.
So that's when I get annoyed.
Now, have you ever opened for someone, and don't name names obviously, and have done better than them, and has that given you an ego boost? Or do you not really pay attention to that, or you're just confident in what you say so it really doesn't matter who does better, it's not a competition?
Well, it's certainly not a competition. I mean, it's an individual sport, but here's the thing is like the opening spot is the best spot because you're doing your best 25 as opposed to the 45.
Right.
Now there's guys who it's like they could go 4 hours and it would just get better and better and better, right? There's also times where the headliner you're opening for isn't having a good night, doesn't feel well, doesn't want to be. There's all these different elements.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that you're better than that comedian. And if you flipped it, and they were opening for me, the chances are that they would have had a better set or got the bigger laugh. So there's so many components. Like an evening of comedy is an organism. There's the club,
Right.
there's the environment, there's what day of the week it is. If it's a Friday night, it's the late show and they're drinking a lot, as opposed to the Saturday early show. There's how many people are in the audience. If there's big groups and there's bachelorette parties and shit. There's so many different elements. So it's like, you know, each show is its own little world.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there are people that you're just better, a more skilled comedian than.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like consistently you'll do better than that person. You know, but in terms of like the guys I opened for who were like really, really skilled, there's been times that I felt like, oh, they've said, you know, you had the better set, but that would never be like, you're the better comedian.
Right.
That wouldn't be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you yourself are having an off night, or your audience is just not being receptive, does that kind of dig at your confidence, or you're just, you know how funny you are, you don't like it, not blame the audience, but just know that these jokes have landed other places and it has nothing to do with me so much as the audience just isn't taking it the same way?
Yeah, I don't, sometimes I get bored of my set and I'm like, shit, I haven't written anything that I want to write in a while.
Right.
Or just because of other things, like sometimes I just get like, I get a little sick and tired of my own set, and then and it's just, you go through these periods where you just haven't, you're not writer's block, but you go through ups and downs with how you know, you can't force your muses.
Right.
They're gonna come when they come, and like the jokes, they come through you. So if the audience is shit, or if it's like an off night or something like that, I'm like, I don't really take that home with me. You know, there's that thing where it's like people are like, you know, you're only as good as your last set.
Right.
I don't think I really subscribe to that much, because I feel pretty confident in what I'm doing. I think of it more in terms of like the month. Like, where have I been this month? I don't think of it on like where have I been in this specific set.
Gotcha. Now, off the stage, do you have the same personality and you're constantly being a wise ass and always going for a joke with your friends, either to come up with new material, or just because that's who you are? I mean,
I'm not really a wise ass on stage.
Okay.
So
you're not one out.
No, I'm not like, I wouldn't say like no, like I can
or
turn.
sarcastic is more what I meant.
Yeah, I'm definitely sarcastic, but yeah, I can turn off.
Yeah.
I have both my podcasts. I have No Disrespect with Mike Vecchione, where we are so on. And then I have Neurotica, which is my podcast, which is almost like a self-help sex and anxiety podcast, where I just like, there's no social mask on me whatsoever when I'm doing that show. So it's like, you know, there have been times where in my life where it's like, shit, I'm sort of taking on this role of Justin Silver, the comedian, and I'm bringing it through everywhere. And like, you know, social media is a perfect example of that. It's like your presence online is so much of like, it's not really who you are a lot internally, and it's a lot of, especially because I'm sponsored by a lot of companies and I'm selling things, and I do like fitness videos and I do this stuff with the dogs. So I try to pick my moments a little better and be conscious of what I'm doing, but that's just sort of a conscious thing. I get really, really annoyed when I'm around a big group of comedians and it's like a pissing contest.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends are just, they're not, I mean, they're grown up. I mean, they're mature. They don't really do that anymore. They're none of them are disingenuous, you know. And if there are people that like, I just find it to be a little too disingenuous. Like, there's times where it's just so fun to be on sometimes, where I just like, I'm riding that wave and it's almost like I'm getting a little fucking manic,
Right.
you know. But I think as a habit, like I've really had to, through meditation and through like the self-development work that I've done, like I really have learned how to chill the fuck out, you know.
Does doing your set or just how you are in everyday life kind of bring about a catharsis to what you're talking about, and you're kind of working it out while you're doing a set and kind of make yourself feel better after you're done? Almost like
Do I use
quasi-therapy?
comedy as therapy? Is that what you're asking?
That's what, yes, in a roundabout way.
Do I use comedy as therapy? Comedy is therapeutic, but I wouldn't say I use it as therapy. I say it's more of a commentary on therapy.
Okay.
So it is cathartic. It's so freeing to be able to, when a topic actually gets to the point where I'm talking about it on stage, that means that I've processed it to the point where now I can start to make art out of it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like I'm drawing with the color that looks like blood, but I'm not bleeding.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
You understand?
Absolutely.
And that's a really therapeutic place. That's a really cathartic place to be at, because you're like, wow, this is now at the point where it's not affecting me so much and I can make fun of it. And that's when you're free. And that's why I say, when audiences are clamming up about certain topics, it's so much better to be on the side where you can make fun of the thing, because it doesn't mean you have a lack of sensitivity to it. It means you have a very strong sensitivity to it, and your way of processing and dealing with it is almost healthier.
Yes, I agree.
You know,
with
if
you.
you're shrinking from words, you know.
I agree with you, and we'll have a conversation off
Yeah.
camera about why I agree with you. But
Yeah.
We talked about social media, and do you feel that social media is both a help and a hindrance, because you can get yourself out there to more people, but yet at the same time, like you mentioned, you kind of have to be on all the time
Yeah.
about what you put out there?
I mean, it's an addiction, 100%. I can use it, especially to get attention from it. I can use that's a very available vice for me, and especially it's like I've put down a lot of substance. There's not many vices in my life that have to do with like external substance, but that's a way I can get out of myself. And so I think I have to be very conscious about that, of like what my intentions are, what I'm doing, how much I'm looking at it. I did this podcast the other day that got like thousands of followers. Brought thousands of followers my way and a lot of attention. It's like I really saw how I was using it as an avoidance strategy to not just sit there and feel loneliness or feel discomfort.
Right.
So I can certainly use it as that, and you can also use it for this, you know, the dopamine rush of attention seeking. So at the same time, it also allows me to promote podcasts and express myself. So I
Right.
think that just like anything, you have to be conscious, and you have to be aware of what your intentions are. And if you're acting out, you have to at least know you're acting out.
Right.
You know what I mean? People know. It's like, listen, it's no different than, you know, someone's like, you know what, I'm going out a lot this week. I'm going to a bunch of parties. I want to socialize. There's alcohol involved. You have to be conscious of your intake.
Right.
So with social media, you have to be conscious of your intake. We took a pause here because I've been licking my lips, not because I'm horny, because my mouth's been so fucking dry.
Now, see,
and
I
I finally got myself.
Here I was thinking that I was turning you on this whole time.
You're not.
Damn it. Well, this interview's over. So thank you for coming by.
My charity.
We started talking about your podcast and your charity.
Yeah.
So
What would you want to know about first?
You pick.
My charity. I mean, I've been working with dogs for 15 years.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, no. I've been working with dogs for 15 years. I've been a dog expert. I hosted Dogs in the City on CBS and authored a book about training dogs. I've trained dogs around the world. I've had TV shows in Hong Kong for it, and that all spurned from my desire to rescue dogs, which I was doing stand-up comedy. It was the first year I started doing stand-up comedy at the old Boston Comedy Club. It was called the Comedy Village. It was rebranded the Comedy Village, and I was a young comic just trying to get stage time, and so I was barking tickets. There you go. I was barking tickets, and I adopted 2 pit bulls from a makeshift shelter in the Bronx, and I realized that a lot of these people who work with animals, their hearts are bigger than their homes in a way, and they don't have a lot of funding, and a lot of them aren't really good socially. You know, a lot of times people go to animals because they have trouble with people. And I was like, man, I got to get people in here on a Wednesday night. Why don't I do this comedy benefit and give all the money to that rescue shelter? And then, we made maybe $1,000, and then we did it again the next year, and it was like 5,000, and then we started selling out Carolines, and some of the best comics in the country have performed at Funny for Fido. It's the website has been, it's either going to be funnyforfido.org, or you can go to iamjustinsilver.com, and there's a tab for Funny for Fido. But we do these stand-up comedy benefits and bring the biggest comics in the country together to raise money for all these animal shelters. And so we've been doing it, it's like 12 years now we've been doing it. It's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's sort of the thing that it's one of the things I'm the most proud of in my life, you know? It's one of the things where dogs have given me so much from, the majority of my career on television has been the work that I've done with dogs.
Right.
And it was almost a weird thing where comedically I had to try to break away from that and being that as an identity, and trying to figure out like where it fits in my life, because there's so many other things that I want to do performance-wise, and I was performing way before I was working with animals, and it became almost like in today's sort of like, what's your brand and who are you? And because I had so much success with my CBS show, Dogs in the City, and the book and all the morning shows that I've done, it was sort of difficult to be like, no, there's multifacets to who I am as a person. Like you can't, I'm not just going to lock down into this one genre.
Right.
So, but Funny for Fight, it was the way that I've been able to combine my two passions for the love of animals and comedy, and sort of work, do something that's really valuable for a lot of individuals
Extremely
on
valuable.
4 legs and 2 legs. So
Yeah, extremely
Yeah.
valuable. So let's talk about your podcasts.
yeah, well, I have No Disrespect on Gas Digital Network, which is, man, what a fun thing to do. It's a comedian. It's with Mike Vecchione, who I think is one of the best comics in the country. His album is #1 right now. His Tonight Show performances are considered some of the best, and he's been a great friend of mine for like 12 years, someone that I've always wanted to work with in some capacity, and we just sort of have this rhythm together, and it's such a playful, bit-heavy podcast where I get to do so much, everything's on camera, so you can watch it. If you go to YouTube, it's No Disrespect, it's under a YouTube No Disrespect page, and we also, it's on Gas Digital, and it's also got you can hear the last 10 episodes on iTunes, but to be at that network where it's so built out in terms of the camera work that we can do, in terms of how talented the whole staff is, with the audio drops we do, the visuals, me and Mike are really able, Mike and I, are really able to create a show that is almost more like a television show and a bit heavy show, where we bring different guests in and we go from one bit to the next bit to the next bit, and within that we can still do all the personal self-expression and real honest conversations we want to have together. And it's just it's been unbelievable, and it's been so funny, and I can't believe the response that we've gotten on it, because I've only been on it with him. He was originally doing it with another host, and then that didn't work out, and then I came on I want to say maybe 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and we just keep building it out and building it out and building it out. And man, I think the show is one of the funniest, and just the feedback we get from bigger comics who we are so lucky to have on the show doing it, saying that like this is really this show is really something special. And so the stuff I did in film school, from just having a knowledge of editing and having a knowledge of producing on the back end of things, we really get to put our heads down and work on that. Mike is so great with his writing. He's so great with his ideas in terms of bits, and I think we have different skills that complement each other really well, and it's just because we have such a great friendship, the base of it is really our banter together. And then whenever there's holes in it, or there's something that we want to fix out, we're so able to work together and use that team to be like, all right, how do we get let's get this, how do we get to the next level with this thing?
Right.
And it's only on, it's just starting, and it's only on the way up, but I was like, wow, this is a great project to be a part of. It's so funny.
I think, when we were talking a little bit about social media, I think in this day and age, there's so many places that you can express
How many times are you going to
yourself.
say this day and age in this interview?
As many as I want. Why don't you come up with a better phrase then?
How about now?
Now
Go
you
ahead,
have
you're
so
saying,
much social media and YouTube, and you can get on Netflix. You could pretty much be anybody and do anything and get an audience. So I think that has really helped in a huge way, as opposed to being a detriment.
No, I do. I agree with you 100%. Like, we specifically, the amount of time it takes on my Instagram page, it's I am Justin Silver on Instagram. The clips that we do specifically for the show, we sit there and we're like, okay, here's the clips for the show. We sit there and we craft them, and we have someone who's just sitting there editing just specifically for that 1 minute clip, so we can try to tell the story within a minute, as a teaser for the show. And we do it with a few different bits per episode, and then there's the little swipe ups. So the great thing is we have fans that create this fan art for us, and it's always these funny memes and shit like that. So it's like those are the ones I use for the swipe ups. But everything all the promotion really goes through the social media hub, which is made. I wake up in the morning and have a schedule with that shit. And I'm like, all right, I sit there like today's No Disrespect. I'm doing this bit, and this bit goes on social media. This one's going on the swipe up. This one's going out on Twitter. Like, the amount of work of promoting that thing, it's almost as much work. It's almost as much work promoting it as it is actually doing the show.
Yeah.
But you have to really love what you're doing and love that part of it, and enjoy. I enjoy doing that part of it. You know, I enjoy seeing the feedback and people responding to it. And then when there's like a little buzz about it and there's little catchphrases that we say, like we have the "How's your hair" bit, which is like, it's sort of like, you know, we check in like, how's your hair really mean, but like then what's going on under the hair? How's your emotional condition? And so it's like people like, how's your hair? And then like on social media, how's your hair? And then they start talking about something personal that's going on with them. And like, just because that's so ridiculous and we're both Guidos. So it's like, I really enjoy seeing how fans and listen, I don't want to call them fans. That sounds like I don't like how listeners really just start to, they really get to interact with you, and they become a part of the show. And so the little catchphrases we have become characters that they get to adopt themselves, and you really feel like you start to know them. And then when we do live shows, they come out and I'm friends with a lot of the people who were listeners. You know, so that's where social media allows you to be really close with your audience, and your finger's on the pulse with them, and they tell you what they want to hear. And they, you know, the YouTube comics, they're like, oh, when they do this, we hate it, or when we do this, we like it. So we're able to sort of pay attention to what people want to hear. And that's what I was saying about that audience thing. It's the same thing as when you're doing stand-up. You have to pay, like, you can't just be on some tape and like, you know, like you're performing with into the mic with your headphones on. Like you have to be paying attention to what they want to hear, because you're communicating to them. And so when the social media allows us to get this immediate feedback, this immediate response. So it's like doing stand-up in a way, which is great. Like that's the difference between stand-up and acting, is like I can write something, like I'm performing tonight. I wrote thoughts today that those things will be on stage tonight. I'll get an immediate response and know where they are. And the same thing with a podcast, with social media. You know exactly, like you know how this is working. You know how it's being received. That's fucking cool.
Now this is a completely homosexual question to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway because who cares?
8 inches. Sorry.
Damn, I was hoping for 9. The interview's over again. You obviously work out. You obviously put time into your appearance. Does that draw attention to you on top of how funny you are? In terms of like, not
of course.
Do you use it? But,
But I make it like the whole point of it is like I try to like listen. On no disrespect, if you watch the clips, like I take my shirt off on every episode because because I play like I'm playing the character of the person that would do that.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Like 100%.
So it's like, and I get shit, and like I'm gonna get shit for that anyway.
Right.
People listen. I work out because it's like if I don't work out, I'm gonna go out of my goddamn mind. And also, like I also have enough. Like I was saying this on Erotica today, which I'll talk about that too in a second. I was like, my physique is one of two things. Number one, it's sort of like the temple and the place I go to feel safe and comfortable and present in the moment. Like working out for me is this way that, like, it's the way I get in the moment. It's the way I get in touch with my body. So it's like a form of meditation. It's the thing that, it's a place that I feel at home. You know, I feel at home in the gym, and I feel at home, like I feel at home running. I feel like I have to be able to do that, and that's a really cathartic thing for me. It's important for keeping me grounded. At the same time, there's the narcissistic part of me that it's like, yeah, if I'm gonna get attention with my shirt off, of course.
Right.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't be on stage if I wasn't that type of person anyway, and I own that. But, however, the fact, you have to understand, like, when I'm taking my shirt off on the podcast, it's like, because I'm aware that that's going to be, that the character of Justin being like this douchebag who's going to take his shirt off, that's funny. And so I'm doing it to be funny as opposed to like I'm doing it to legitimately get attention that way.
Right.
So I'm so aware of what I'm doing. And if people aren't aware of, like, when we're doing that show, Mike and I are, it's Mike Vecchione, comedian, Justin Silver, comedian. You know, we definitely have we have a lot of moments where, like, you know, I was talking about my grandmother's funeral, where me and Mike get really choked up when we talk about our father's passing. But for the most part, like we are caricatures of ourselves on that show. That is strictly for entertainment. That is the purposes of it. So much in the way, if Mark Wahlberg is playing, you know, the douchebag dad on Daddy's Home and taking his shirt off, it's like, you know, you understand that you have to suspend disbelief for a little bit and understand that it's not really who he is. Right. Okay. So there's that I want to.
That was just my way of you getting to talk about your body.
There you go. You got it.
See?
You got it.
I hook, line, and sinker, just like Barbara Walters. Just call me.
But it's also like, you know, I get, you know, I'm sponsored by fitness companies, and then, you know, CBD companies and stuff, and a lot of like the workout stuff I do is like, you know, there's, you know, when like, you know, fitness people on when fitness people are doing stuff on social media, it's like, the more people are seeing your body,
Yeah.
the more they're seeing the efficacy of the work done. So that's the point of that. Like you have to kind of feel comfortable like that.
So now,
Certain
when you
degree.
share this interview, is there a chance that fitness companies will come after me and just see the physique that I have?
They may.
That's good.
Yeah, they may.
There's benefits to this
I hope that I can spread the wealth. So that's no disrespect, which is like I don't think I've ever had more fun.
Yeah.
And then there's Neurotica, which I just started up again, which is sort of like a sex and anxiety podcast. I say it's
That's an interesting combination.
It's a search for good sex, inner peace, and the perfect hand sanitizer. And it's me talking about mental illness, my own struggles with that, my own personal development, interviewing people that I think are really intelligent, talking about sort of the most vulnerable things, and really taking any social mask off and being really honest and open. And that's really cathartic, because that show, where No Disrespect is a show where I get to be creatively vulnerable, because I'm putting out comedic art and the stage is like that. Neurotica is a place where I'm just as open as I can be, and I try not to do that show where I'm oversharing and using it like I'm like just spilling my own emotional diarrhea, or just emotionally like masturbating and being like,
Right.
oh, look how important my problems are. I try to talk really honestly about things that I think that the normal issues that people struggle with and the human condition. And I try to gain enough information and insight from the work I do with therapy or the guests I have on to talk about things that happen to me personally and answer questions from people or something I read or some issue that comes up in a way that is hopefully going to shed light on and be beneficial to somebody else.
Yeah. What I love about that is, and I could be completely off base, but I would think that some people have the opinion that comedians are just assholes who want to get a rise out of people, and you're actually doing a service to people where it may not come, maybe that's not your intent, but I bet there's a ton of listeners to that podcast that you're really helping. And do you think that there's that kind of
Relationship?
misconception about comedians and like the fact, I mean, you do so much good with the dog charity stuff and with this podcast as well. So I don't even know if there's a question there.
No, I understand what you're saying. Do I? I think a lot of times I think that people think comedians are just crazy. I think the biggest thing is people think that we're just nuts, which we are. And that comedians are narcissists, which that element is certainly true as well. And it's interesting enough, like I was talking on Neurotica, I had a therapist come on, he's like, you're misusing the word narcissist. Like, here's what literally a narcissist is. That's not a narcissist. That may be someone who's attention seeking, but a narcissist is someone who is does not have empathy, there's an element of sociopath to that, and a comedian is the furthest from that, because we're so sensitive. But I think that I don't know if people think that comedians, people could think like comedians are a bunch of douchebags if they are those kind of comedians, but I think comedians like that, guys who are just sort of like hazing assholes, like they don't really work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's sort of such an old stereotype, and that type of comedy I don't think that person would get stage time in this day and age.
I'm very influential.
I don't think people would get stage time, but I do think that for myself personally, it's very easy for people to think of me as in a one-dimensional way. I've always struggled with this. And Jay Ogerson is one of my best friends, was like, when I first started comedy, it was like, my act was douchey. And he was like, you got to start talking about, we were at his house for a Christmas, and I was talking about my OCD and the twitches and the tics I had and like the trauma I had as a kid. And we started talking about that. He's like, you have to start bringing that up in your act. And I was like, I don't know how I would make that funny. And it was only then where I was like, man, there's so much power in vulnerability. And I don't give a shit. And this is why I don't care what anybody has to say about me. I mean, I take criticism from my friends when they're like, listen, you're being out of line, and if I owe an apology, I make an apology. It's not things like that. But if I'm putting work out and someone's like, look at this guy, he's a fucking... there's nothing you can say about me that's going to really hurt me, because it's nothing that I haven't already said about myself. And the power and vulnerability is like, you know, like it's almost like an 8 Mile. Like Eminem's like, I already know all the things he's got to say about me. I am white trash. It's like I talk about my insecurities. I talk about my physical insecurities. Like even people who look like anything, everybody has physical insecurities. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the fuck you look like.
Absolutely.
Everybody has that.
Agreed.
Everybody, and sometimes people who are better looking have more physical insecurities than people, because it's like how much investment they have in that. You know what I mean? And then as we get older and that starts to deteriorate, it starts to, like, you know, how it eats away. Like, you know, everybody's got everyone has problems. And so I think that the great thing about that show is for me personally, it allows me to just be who I really am. And like, I'm a sentient, open soul. You know what I mean? And like, you know, I have a big heart. And so like, that's the place where I get to show my heart. You know, in a different way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Not to get into the specifics of your trauma, but do you think the trauma that happened to you propelled you into what you're doing today?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Did you use comedy as a way to escape it when it was happening, or
Deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, we have.
But does that also make you want to be a compassionate person, where you are helping dogs, you are putting yourself out there?
They go hand in hand. Those things go hand in hand. Like those things go hand in hand. You know, those are like, I think in a way, like trauma, it has such an effect on you, and it can torture you if you don't deal with it properly, but it also shapes who you are.
100, yeah.
And
I now have to stop saying 100%, because now I've said that more than.
But it can shape who you are. Like, you know, here, I'll throw a question back on you, right? As a gay man who's like, you know, you're not 19 right now, where it's like coming out was as socially acceptable at the time when you did. Like, that's something that you have to deal with. Okay, I live in Chelsea, where it's like, I have so many gay friends, and there is a consistent sensitivity and emotional openness amongst the gay friends I have in my life, because they've had to deal with something, and they've had to come to terms with something, and they've had to own who they are in a climate that might not have approved of that.
And I think that's why a lot of gay men are very sarcastic and because that's how they deal with it.
If you've dealt with shit in your life, it can do two things. Your mask will get stronger, you know, in a negative way, where it's like people become incredibly defensive, and the defense mechanisms they try to put up an impenetrable wall of dishonesty. And then if you are lucky enough to bottom out on that and have that break down and fail, then you have to become more open and honest as a human being. And when you become more open and honest as a human being, your empathy, it's impossible to not have empathy. And so for me, at like a young age, I think that the things that I've been through have made me a very empathic person. They've also built a skill set that I've used to survive, which at the same time, when right-sized, has a lot of benefits to it. Like, you know, without, like, that's why performers are performers. They're a lot of times acting out, you know? And so all these sort of complexities go into making an individual who, if you can sort of keep all these things balanced, it's I don't know, it's sometimes it's like a nightmare in my head, but when I step back enough and I just sort of relax and embrace it, I'm like, I'm so comfortable with who I am. You know?
What I love about you, obviously besides your physical,
thank you.
Not technique, physicality, whatever.
Thank you.
Is see, I'm trying to make a joke and it's failing.
I thought you did okay.
Thank you. That's what matters. I find it so interesting that you have the comedian career where you're going for laughs, but then you also have this side of you that is really helping people. And do you feel not a pressure?
Well, they're both helping.
They're both helping, but do you feel a pressure when you're doing that and you have people that are listening to your podcast, like they're really relating to you, and
No.
do you feel not a responsibility? I don't know. You're answering, and
No.
I don't even have to keep. trying to phrase it.
I feel a responsibility to be honest. And I feel a responsibility to be honest with my intentions. And I feel a responsibility to not be oversharing in a way that is almost like too self-indulgent.
Yeah.
Because in general, performing and doing all these things has such an element of self-indulgence to it. And just for my own self-preservation, to not be sitting there like smelling my own farts in the bathtub and thinking how great they are. Like, you have to have some element of humility.
Yeah.
And it would be like a real disservice to be like, I was dealing with some breakup shit, and I so wanted to talk about this, and I was like, how do I talk about this without talking about somebody specific and sharing about them and being out of line like that? How do I talk about this so I don't feel like I'm just like emotionally spewing and making it a therapy session, you know?
Yeah.
And how do I talk about this in a way where there's like, is there a point? Am I trying to make a bigger point here? Am I trying to be like, hey, here's what helped me get through this, so it may help you get through this?
Yeah.
And here's the thing is like, if people are like, you know, it's not like Clockwork Orange where someone's sitting there and they're strapped to a chair and their eyelids are open and they have to watch my Instagram videos and there's things shoved in their ears. It's like, if you don't like it, you can turn it off.
Right.
So I don't really feel a responsibility to try to like rescue anybody, or I feel more of a responsibility to try to be honest and kind of like also like kind of know my shit a little bit and be like, you know, if you're going to talk about something about neuroscience, or you're going to talk about a book that you've read, or you're going to speak about a product that you believe in, like you better speak about that from a place of knowledge of what you're talking about.
Right.
And also be willing to say like, shit, I don't know what this is yet, or it's something I tried. You know, so I kind of feel a responsibility in that regard. Like, am I being authentic here, and am I doing a service to myself, and am I doing a service to anybody to listen to this? Am I being genuine? So I feel a responsibility to be genuine.
Yeah.
You know.
Awesome. Justin, this has been really fantastic.
Yeah.
I literally could talk to you till tomorrow.
Cool, man.
But I appreciate you stopping down here all the
Yeah.
way in the bowels of New York.
It was a pleasure. It really was. You're a very
same.
good interviewer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome.
And honestly, I'm not just saying this because you came down here and all, but I really find you an impressive human being. You're extremely funny.
Thank
and
you.
then you also have that human side of you
Yeah.
that really wants to do good.
Yes, I do.
And it really shows.
Thank you.
So I think that's just an amazing combination.
Thank you. I pray. Yeah, it really means a lot that you would consider me to do something like this. So,
Awesome.
you know,
Thank you.
I appreciate it as much as you appreciate it.
All right. You have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Break legs at your
Oh, can I
section.
plug stuff?
Yeah. Go
Oh,
plug.
let me do
So
this.
I'm gonna put your links and stuff to all your stuff in the body, but go for it.
So listen, if you're interested in some of the stuff I do, my podcasts are No Disrespect. It's also Neurotica. My social media is at I am Justin Silver, and it's IamJustinSilver.com. So you can find all my stuff through those. I'm on the road a lot, performing a lot. There's a lot of different interesting stuff I do. Funny for Fido, my charity. You'll always see that on my social media. I host a monthly show down at New York Comedy Club, Anxiety Attack. So there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff I do if people are interested. If you're not, that's cool too.
And if you're not, become interested because you're missing out. I think.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, Justin.
Thank you.